Not every video game is created equal, and not every title can enjoy the accolades and sales of the Super Marios, Grand Theft Autos, and Call of Duties of the world. And whilst gamers often associate flopping commercially with a poorly made game, that's not always the case. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 8 recent failed video games that became cult classics. Number 8. Mad Max. 2015's Mad Max is an open-world survival title developed by Avalanche Studios. Whilst not following the events of any one Mad Max film, the game clearly takes a lot of inspiration from them, with its post-apocalyptic wasteland setting. One of the first titles to emphasize vehicular combat across its open world, players are required to upgrade their rides as they battle Scarborough Scrotus's gang. However, in an era where open-world titles dominated the market, Mad Max failed to make the splash Avalanche were hoping for. The bulk of its mixed reception stemmed from the game's storyline, which only came to life right at the end, by which time most players had tossed it to the back of their library. The game's quests also were given a bunch of flack, as well as a number of technical bugs that hadn't been ironed out. Nevertheless, the game's setting and Batman Arkham-esque combat has seen Mad Max's standing with gamers begin to climb again. On the back of a possible sequel being in the works, the game saw its player count jump to its highest point since October 2021, with a peak of 2,436 players in September of 2022. Number 7. Sunset. 2015's Sunset is an interactive storytelling experience that deserves way more love than it gets. The game is played from a first-person perspective, as players follow Angela Burns, an African-American housekeeper who performs a number of tasks for her client 1 hour before sunset. The more she cleans, the more the world around her begins to change, and the more of her story is uncovered. The game is an intimate and visually stunning experience to play through, but still one that far too many gamers haven't actually experienced yet. The game's development was partially funded by fans on Kickstarter, raising $67,000 on the platform in total. However, despite earning a considerable amount of praise for its looks and tone, Sunset has remained one of the gaming world's best-kept secrets. Nominated for the Games of Change award at the Game Awards in 2015, Sunset only sold 4,000 copies in its first month on the shelves, with roughly half of those being reserved for its Kickstarter backers. The commercial failing of Sunset led to Tale of Tales announcing they would no longer be involved within the gaming space, but that hasn't stopped the title being a cult classic among those that helped get it off the ground. Number 6. Shenmue 3. The Shenmue series has garnered an infamous reputation for being a cult classic sort of series. Back in the Dreamcast days, the original Shenmue title had been developed as the most expensive video game in the world. However, by the time it came to the series being rebooted with the 3rd edition, developers had resorted to Kickstarter campaigns to get things off the ground. Making history as the highest funded game on the platform, Shenmue 3 launched in November of 2019 and instantly began to divide opinions with its by-the-book approach of things. Labeled a core niche project by Lars Wingfors, the game sold half the amount of copies as the remastered original Shenmue title, with many reports suggesting sales had been much lower than what had been hoped. Nevertheless, the game's faithfulness to its series' roots has continued to sit well with the fans who did receive it well. Following the release of the Battle Rally DLC in January of 2020, Shenmue 3 jumped to 13,000 followers on Steam and has gone on to elevate that number even higher to just shy of 15,000 as of October 2022. Number 5. Deadly Premonition 2, A Blessing in Disguise. 2010's Deadly Premonition holds a record in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most critically polarizing video game in the world, and it's understandable how Access Games ended up with that honor. The story of Francis York Morgan's investigation into the Raincoat Killer was filled with meme-worthy flaws, but remains a wonderfully dark whodunit story that proved so popular with its loyal followers. We even got a port on Switch in 2019 and a fully fledged sequel in 2020. Toybox Inc.'s title instantly garnered a mixed reputation from critics for its less than impactful storyline compared to its predecessor. Blessing in Disguise also came with serious technical limitations, none more obvious than its painfully slow frame rate that could reach as low as 5 per second. But the quirkiness that made the original such a cult classic was still very much at play, and that meant the game would continue to house a dedicated crop of fans. The eccentric characters were a big plus, especially the returning Morgan, and a 7 out of 10 rating on Steam is a much kinder score than such a technically flawed title can usually expect to receive. If nothing else, the existence of the game and the original Deadly Premonition's port over to Nintendo's latest system shows interest in this divisive series is still going strong. Number 4. Civilization 6. Sid Meier's Civilization series has always been one of the most successful turn-based titles. However, it was with 2010's Civ 5 that the series really hit its commercial peak. A PC exclusive, the game enjoyed critical acclaim during its lifetime and is still played by its loyal fanbase. It was a long wait for the game's sequel, with Civilization 6 eventually releasing in October of 2016. From the off, this was a game that was designed to do away with everything players had learned from Civ 5. A new technology tree, districts outside of cities, and random engagements were all thrown in to create a totally fresh feeling entry. However, upon release, Civ 6 was subject to a spyware controversy, with the original release having Red Shell's ad tracking bundled in, and the game received some lukewarm receptions following the decision to remove features such as the diplomatic victory option. Thankfully, the game's impressive strategy ceiling, 2 major expansions, and a slew of additional updates led to most of the issues being addressed, and Civ 6's reputation gradually began to claw its way back to the heights of its predecessor. Civ 5 might still be the go-to title in the franchise, but for those who stuck it out, there are still plenty of loyal fans who love its sequel. Number 3. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Off the bat, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was a seriously ambitious title, which always had the risk of flopping hard. The 6th main entry to the series, the game's reputation pre-release hardly put the title on the best footing. The removal of series staples like character assist moves and 3-on-3 battles gave the impression that Capcom were going all in on a new formula for Infinite. This might have been one of the reasons why the game failed to make much of a splash in terms of both sales and reception. A 72 out of 100 score on Metacritic is hardly a crisis, but Capcom ended up missing their sales target for Infinite by 1 million copies or so, only selling half of the 2 million target they'd set. That said, the wholesale changes the game brought has certainly endeared the title to those players who have stuck around. More open-ended fighting systems help give the game a more personalized feel, rewarding more hardcore players who invested more hours into Infinite with a higher skill ceiling. Number 2. Nier. As a spin-off title based on the 5th possible ending of the original Drakengard title, Nier was always in danger of being a cult classic. The game was released in April of 2010, with the Japanese market getting 2 alternative releases featuring a different protagonist. Set in a post-apocalyptic world 1,000 years after the ending of Drakengard, Nier has some impressive acting and received some praise for its storyline and soundtrack, but overall it failed to win the majority of fans and critics over. The bulk of the criticism for the game came aimed at its visuals, with the majority of reviews believing they just weren't up to standard for some of the grandiose sights players would be treated to. Commercial sales also weren't much to write home about, with director Yoko Taro claiming, "We weren't really in the red, but it wasn't exactly a success either." Nevertheless, for Drakengard veterans especially, the game proved to be a hit, with enough fans to justify an updated version, and that sold over 1 million units. Then of course there was the full-blown sequel Nier Automata in 2017. Number 1. Shadow Man Remastered. Out of the long list of titles that have never managed to break into the mainstream, Shadow Man might just be the heaviest hitter of all. Originally released way back in 1999, this voodoo-centered adventure title drew some polarizing opinions, in part due to just how damn difficult it was to complete in the pre-YouTube days. Nevertheless, its presence on nearly every console under the sun in the early 2000s and original themes made it a favorite for horror fans around the world, prompting Night Dive Studios to make a remastered edition via GOG.com in 2013. The game was eventually added to Steam that year, but was strictly limited to PC systems, which for a title that was available on 3 separate consoles back in the day wasn't the smartest decision. Fan appetite for a true remastering hadn't been quenched, but thankfully Night Dive came back strong with 2021's Shadow Man Remastered. Released for Windows, Switch, the PS4, and Xbox One, the port featured 4K resolution, better shadow mapping, per-pixel lighting, and a completely revamped approach to physics, controls, and AI behavior. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other recent failed video games that became cult classics. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.